Hello and welcome to episode 350 of the podcast. This is a very special Q&A episode. I love doing these on the round numbers. I did an episode 250 Q&A, and hopefully I'll do one for episode 400 as well, just to give you a little insight into my process and just answer questions that you guys might have from me. So let's get right into it because don't want to waste any of your time. First question from Spooky Monk. Hello, I saw your podcast with Andy, real as fuck guy, and I was very impressed with your episode. I immediately checked your sub number, thinking it was at least over 300,000, but was surprised it was very low. My question is, how many hours do you put in for each podcast? And your main habits that act like pillars for your day and week. Thank you, and keep going. You are awesome. Thank you, Spooky Monk. So I appreciate you saying that the YouTube channel is underrated. It's actually one thing that we're starting to take seriously now. And by we, I mean me and Video King Pablo. We are making an effort to post at least one YouTube video and one clip. So like one vertical short form clip from the podcast every single day. And we're thinking that that will help grow the channel. We've already started to do that over the past 2 weeks. And we've seen a lot of growth in those 2 weeks. So I think that that's something that we will continue to do. And I'm very excited for that. And I appreciate you saying it's an underrated podcast, or at least underrated YouTube channel. How many hours do I put in for each podcast? I get this question all the time, and I truly have no idea, no way to accurately put a number on it. It's a lot. I mean, if I think I do 5 to 20 hours of research per guest, and then you actually have the conversation, so that's an hour. And then after the conversation, you have to spend time thinking about titles, thumbnails, how to present the podcast in the best possible light, clips. I don't know. I would probably ballpark 20 hours per episode. So 60 hours a week. That sounds right. I'm not too sure, though. I'd have to get somebody to start tracking and check out the actual numbers, because I really have no idea. But I appreciate you asking that question. My main habits that act like pillars for my day and week. For me, so running is one thing that I've recently added to the mix, which is in the past month. That's because of friends like George Heaton, people like Tommy Clark, Hunter Weiss, who I just see running all the time, and I see that's part of their edge. Marcus Milione, got to throw him in there as well, episode 345. But I am trying to do as best as I physically can, and that means for me lifting, running, and going to hopefully start adding yoga to the mix as well. The exercise and the movement piece is a huge pillar. And if I'm not lifting or if I'm not running that day, I'm at least getting 10,000 steps in. So that's a huge thing. Another is meditation, which is probably the most important thing that I can attribute any success that I've had for this podcast and or just life in general. Just ease and inner peace comes from meditation for me. And just because you have inner peace doesn't mean you have less ambition. And Joe Hudson eloquently explained that to me in episode 348, worth checking out. But that was a huge thing for me, was meditating, going inward, and making it a practice and a discipline. So it was something that I was forced to do every single day. And when I did that, it's a lot different than, I'll meditate whenever I feel like it. I've done that at different points in my life. And when it's actually a practice, when it's actually, I'm going to do this every day, whether I feel like it or not, the best results happen. And this is true for running, lifting, meditation, podcasting, anything that you want to achieve. Sticking to a schedule of some sort forces you to do things when you don't feel like doing them, which is actually when you need to do them. And those are a couple of the main habits. And the third main habit that act as a pillar for my day and week is doing the podcast. Doing 3 conversations a week forces me to get better at asking questions, learning about people, connecting with people, and I wouldn't be who I am without the podcast. And so it's definitely a main habit. And I've recently started to try to make it a habit to do 3 episodes a week as opposed to doing batch recordings of like 6 episodes in 1 week or 10 episodes in 1 week and then taking 2 or 3 weeks off, because podcasting and conversations are very much a skill, and it's become a pillar for me to at least show up for the skill twice a week minimum, and hopefully 4 times, 5 times a week. But yeah, that's kind of the main habits that act as pillars. I appreciate your question and comments. And the next one is from TZ. What's your prep like before each episode? So I do a few things. And if I don't do these few things, I feel uncomfortable going into the episode. One is I listen to at least 2 episodes that the guest that I'm about to have on, has been on in the past. And if I can't do that because they've either never been on a podcast or have only been on one before, I make sure to go through their Twitter, go through their Instagram, go through a Google search. I want to come into this conversation with context. Not that I want to know everything about them, because maybe then I won't be surprised when I learn about interesting things that happen during the conversation. But I want to come in with context and prepared so that I can put them in the best possible light. So it's listen to 2 podcasts, at least, more likely 5, 6, 7, 8, if possible. Then I'm also going to look through their Twitter and Instagram, and I'm going to Google them and their hometown. That's something I've mentioned to a few people, and they've mentioned that they have never heard before. And I got this from Sean Evans. So what I'll do is I'll search Tiffany Zong hometown and whatever hometown you're from, and I'll figure out what hometown you're from. And the reason for this is because the hometown papers cover people the best, and that's because they have the most context for the person's journey. So that's a tip I recommend, and that's part of my prep. Vinny asks, 1 to 10, how nervous were you to interview Andy Frisella, and why? So I was actually at a 1, meaning I wasn't nervous at all, and I did a meditation, 60-minute meditation that morning, which has become one of my pillars over the past 3 weeks, but I recommend 20 minutes just to start if you've never meditated before. But the reason why I wasn't nervous to interview Andy Frisella was because I'd done the work, right? It had been 3.5 years since I started 75 Hard for the first time. It was something that I knew that if I wasn't prepared to interview him in that moment, then I was really never going to be. And I knew that the truth of how he impacted me could come across if I was willing to go there. So for me, I was not nervous at all. And I think if I'd interviewed him 200 episodes ago, let's say episode 146, or 300 episodes ago, say episode 46, I would have been nervous. And I think it's just like knowing that I've done the reps to become good enough at the thing that I want to be good at to make an impact on him and also the people listening. So wasn't nervous at all, was excited, was really energized, and hopefully you could see that in the behind the scenes footage that my great friend Hunter Weiss just posted today, which I will link below. So yeah, it was an amazing experience, and I wasn't nervous at all. Greg Lunt asks, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give the Danny Miranda who had not yet recorded his first podcast episode? The advice that I would give is stick to a schedule. The more you do, the better you'll get at the craft, and prepare for the conversation. But also, don't prepare too much. That might surprise people because we do our research here. But the truth is that if you prepare too much, you might get too in your own head. At least that was the case for me. Episode 61, Ali Abdallah is a great example of this. But for me, it was like sticking to the schedule and becoming disciplined when of showing up when I didn't feel like showing up has been the biggest differentiator. And I could tell you, this is how to structure a conversation. This is how I found most success doing the podcast. But that doesn't mean anything unless you actually do it yourself and do the reps yourself. So the advice that I would give is stick to a schedule and do it a lot, which is what I did for the first year. 2, what areas do you think you've spent too much time on with regards to the podcast, and what areas not enough time? So it depends on your goal and what you're trying to achieve. For me, one might say that I spend way too much time on research. And I would say to them, you're probably right if my intention was to grow the show. But my intention is to deeply connect with the person that I'm speaking to and make them feel seen and give them an experience that they might not otherwise get. So it's hard for me to answer because it's the thing that other people would think that I'm wasting my time on is actually the thing that I enjoy doing the most and that brings me the most fulfillment. What areas am I not spending enough time on? I would say YouTube. YouTube is probably the place where if the podcast grows on YouTube, the best things will happen. I've also noticed that on Instagram as well, where I'm spending a lot of time there. And because of that, it's easier for me to book guests on Instagram now than it was for me to do 6 months ago or a year, because I've posted a lot there and because people will see me having a certain number of followers and be like, oh, this seems pretty legit. And so I haven't spent enough time mastering YouTube and getting good at it and optimizing for titles and thumbnails and really doing my best there. And so YouTube is my answer, and focusing on YouTube more in 2023, which is looking like posting there at least once a day, one clip or the full-length podcast a day, and doing one short-form vertical clip as well. Brian asks, aka Be Nice, he asks, in the last 3 months of asking your final question to guests on your podcast, what is something that you have applied on a more regular basis to your daily life based on someone else's challenge? It's a great question. And I probably should have looked through the list of challenges that people have asked. And that's something that I want to actually do, is compile a list of all the challenges that people have suggested, because my answer to this would change based on this if I had all of them in front of me. So if you're a listener of the podcast and would like to do that, that'd be pretty cool. I would love to see all the challenges listed out. But the first one that comes to mind is Dan McCormick's challenge on spending an hour a day without your phone. I had started my meditation challenge right before then of an hour a day. So I guess technically it's not based on his challenge that I changed my behavior, but it was right around that time of him saying you should spend an hour a day without your phone. Like, we don't know really what the phone is doing to us, and it's amazing, but we should also spend time without it. I love that idea. And so doing an hour a day of meditation forces you to spend time without your phone, without your devices. And I think it's certainly very helpful to do. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, but I would love to see that challenge list. Paul Millard asks, why are sports cool? So this comes from a recent discussion Paul and I had in person, where we were just talking about how there's a push in the world of technology to make anything that's not productive not cool or not interesting. But the truth is that sometimes the most unproductive things, quote unquote unproductive things, can actually bring you a lot of joy and actually have a lot of value that people don't think about. Another example of this, actually, now that I think about it, is babies. It's not like we have put having children on a pedestal in our society, and because it's not a productive thing to do. And that there's dangers to that, to only the productive being worthy or valuable, the quote unquote productive. So sports are cool because they help bring people together, they unite people, and they are something that a lot of people can connect with, and you can connect with a lot of people on them. And yeah, sure, it's surface level, and yeah, sure, you're viewing someone else's success and you're looking at that, but it's also like full of childlike wonder. It's like children love sports, and there's something to, if you love sports as a kid, there's something to keeping that passion alive. And I haven't done a great job of that, but I will be interested to see how that changes as my life evolves. Norm asks, who or what is your muse that keeps you going? So this is an interesting question. I don't feel as if I have one on first thought. And it's like, the muse that keeps me going is like, why wouldn't I? If I enjoy what I'm doing, I'm getting positive feedback, I'm helping people. And I don't just mean with the podcast. I mean just with life, right? Like, I don't feel as if I do have a muse that keeps me going. I feel like the thing that keeps me going is being friends with the voice in my head that says, you're doing pretty good at this life stuff. And by that, I mean, I'm enjoying my own company and enjoying my actions that I'm taking. And it hasn't always been true. And so I guess the muse that keeps me going is myself. That sounds a little weird, but it is right now. Ryan asks, how much of your prepared questions / topics do you typically get to address in an interview? This is a great question. I would say, if I had to guess, maybe 75%, or 50%, but it's not always that. Sometimes it's 100%. Sometimes it's 50. It's when someone mentions something in a conversation that you want to just explore and go deep on, then there's a beauty in that. And there were times like my Ali Abdallah episode, for example, which I would love to redo with Ali, and hopefully I will when he comes to the United States or I go to the UK. It's like there are times when you need to flow with it and you need to just let go to what you thought you were going to ask and go into something that you couldn't have possibly known you were going to ask or discuss. And so for me, it's probably 50 to 75%. It's always great to have an outline. It's always great to have questions prepared of what you think you can do or what you can ask. But it's always great to just let those go as well and just be and flow and be like, oh, what about this thing you said? What about that? I found that when I was able to let go of the reins of what I wanted to ask and really paid attention and listened, the conversations got better. I mean, a good example of this might be Andy Frisella. A lot of the topics we talked about were things that I was planning on asking prior. But I remember one point in specific was I realized during the conversation how he was so comfortable sharing himself and the way in which he had been flawed. And I admired that in him. And I asked him about it. And I had not previously thought up that question. It just hit me in that moment. And so my work is to really tune into my body and tune into my mind so that I can best and most effectively feel what I'm feeling in that moment so that I can express it. And I really think that's all of our missions in life. And like the better you get at that skill of tuning into your body and mind and expressing what you actually are meaning to express, the better you get at life. That to me is living skillfully. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do most effectively in the podcast. Niall asks, what's your dream podcast to go on? Can't say Rogan. It's a tough one for me because I don't really think about appearing on other shows too often. I can't control it. I can't control what other people do with their show, their program. I know personally for me, it's so based on my own interests, the people who fascinate me, and it's so dependent. Like it really could just be a book I'm reading or a topic that I haven't explored, but I want to. And so I don't often think about me being a guest on other shows because I know it's so out of my control. But the podcasts that I love are Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson, My First Million, Sean Puri and Sam Parr, which I just went to their live show this past weekend, and it was incredible. Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, but obviously I can't say Rogan. So, of course, I would love to appear as a guest on some of my favorite podcasts, but I don't have any expectation, and I don't know. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And my life will be great either way. But I appreciate the question. Darren Vest asks, Sup, bro? What's up, my man? How we doing? I'm doing great. And I'm incredibly grateful for life right now. In this moment, I feel very, very fortunate to be recording this podcast episode to you guys, and grateful for all the thoughtful and interesting questions. John asks, the best agency idea for someone who wanted to build around podcasts, i.e. the new creating shorts. So I actually haven't spoke to too many people about this or told too many people about this, but I'm actually doing this in a way. I'm doing consulting for podcasters and helping them grow their shows or helping connect them to other guests that they would like to have on their show. And I don't know if it's the best agency idea, and the only reason I'm uniquely positioned to build this out is because I've had a lot of amazing people on the show. But I would say that if you can help somebody grow on YouTube, that would probably be an idea. And I know YouTube's prioritizing podcasts as well. So, yeah, I would say helping someone grow their podcast on YouTube is going to be a big idea, especially because the YouTube podcast system seems to just be starting and kicking off. So, we'll check that out. Monica Lim asks, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? So for me, right now, the biggest and most important thing that I've done in my life is going inward and looking inward. And I often say, you could turn off this podcast and you could listen to yourself, and that would make me very happy because, yeah, it's good to get advice and it's good to read and it's good to listen to podcasts, and I do all of that. But it's also really good to listen to yourself. And in our culture, it seems as if we have over-prioritized other people's perspectives greater than our own. And how can we change that? Or at least bring the balance closer to your own perspective. We probably lived in a time at some point in life where, and not too long ago, where you would listen to yourself, you would be bored more than you would be listening to other people's opinions or perspectives because there was less entertainment or less things to keep you busy. But today we live in the opposite world. We live in a world where people have so much stimulus at all times. And so can you go inward and can you sit with yourself? Can you sit with the silence? Can you look at nothing and be okay with it? If you can be comfortable with silence or nothing, and if that could be a happy outcome for you, then you are basically undefeatable in life. Think about that. Think about that. If you are happy with nothingness, then anything you do see, anything you do hear, anything that impacts your life slightly positively is going to be enhanced because nothingness is a great thing in and of itself. And so I would write the book about going inward. At least that's what I assume the book would be like. I've noticed time and time again that what we assume something will be before we start it is so different from what it actually is afterwards. And so, yeah, I assume it would be about going inward, but we will see because I would like to write a book one day for sure. So we'll see. David asks, are you going to / have you already implemented the visualization techniques that Andy spoke about? If yes, to either, what are you visualizing? So the visualization techniques that Andy spoke about, that really hit me. He spent 15 minutes on the podcast talking about his own visualization, how at 27, he was $60,000 in debt. And 5 years later, he was in private jets and speaking to thousands or tens of thousands of people. And yeah, I mean, I can't say that didn't impact me deep level. And it really did. It impacted me deeply. And so right after that, I started taking moments in my meditation, my 60-minute meditation that I was mentioning before, that we're on day 21 of. And in moments when I saw that there were downtimes or in the shower, I would imagine, what does the most wild version of a future look like? What are things that you would be giddy about, or you would just be so happy imagining? And for me, that's a lot to do with the success of this podcast, of growing it, of talking to people who inspire me, to talking to people who just fill me with joy, and helping people at the grandest of scales. So just imagining that over and over and over again in different ways has been really helpful as just a way to fill me with joy. So yeah, great question, David. And that's what I've been doing. Danielle asks, what are the childhood experiences which shaped you, who you are today? So I would say that the couple of big ones that just stick out so strongly to me are, when I was 13 years old, I started a time management blog for 3 months, and that's when I wrote about Gary Vaynerchuk. If you look at the posts on that blog, commandyourtime.com, or maybe it was commandyourtime.net, I'm not sure which one it was, but I would go, you look back at the archive of the posts, and it's hilarious. Like, the things that I'm talking about there, you can see that it's very similar to the things I'm talking about today on this podcast. I'm talking about them today on this podcast with more experience or more references to draw on, but it's the same topics, which is fascinating in and of itself, to see that the early start, the true state of what I was feeling in 2009, I believe, are the things I'm talking about in 2023. So yeah, that's a very formative experience. And then 15 years old, starting a Knicks blog rather, and starting on Twitter. I started on Twitter when I was 13 as well, but going on Twitter when I was 15, doing the Knicks blog for a year and a half, and having incredible experiences, meeting NBA players, being like, oh wow, like if I focus on the internet, my life can really get interesting. And this whole thing that it's a crazy thing that you could just type thoughts and that anyone can see them anytime, in any place, anywhere. Like, to me, that's a wild concept. And the podcast is a manifestation of that. It's a manifestation of, oh, I'm having this thought in this moment, and you are experiencing this thought that I'm having in a different place, in a different time, and we are doing that almost instantaneously. Like, that to me is the coolest thing. And when that idea grabbed me, it's grabbed me for 15 years, right? I haven't been able to let it go since I was 12, 13 years old. So yeah, those are a couple of the childhood experiences that really impacted me at a deep level. Chris asks, what are some tips for achieving deep work state? So one cool app to check out is freedom.to, I believe is the link for it. And Freedom is an incredible way for you to just block all the distractions from your website, the websites that you check out, that you refresh over and over again, like Twitter or YouTube or whatever it is for your Instagram. You could block those very easily. They have an iPhone app and they have a desktop app. It's really good. I recommend it. But that's like kind of covering up the symptom. It's like, what's the actual problem there? The problem is that you're not focusing on something that you really enjoy doing. And so the solution is to get into deep work, for me at least, is to find something that I really care about or really want to be doing. This podcast is a great example, or researching for the podcast. It's like I'm going into a deep work state when I'm researching. So that's something. And it's because I really care about it. So what are the things you really care about? And how do you make those things a greater part of your life? Rich asks, straight up talk for 5 to 10 minutes, giving a play-by-play on how to get the first steps of your goal going and how to lean into it. Relate it back to how you started the podcast and how 75 Hard specifically helped you change who you fundamentally were as a person. So, for me, you have to understand that wherever you want to go is going to take you a long time to get there. And at least if it's a sizable goal, right? Like for me, it's selling out Madison Square Garden. It's like, I'm not going to be able to do that today. Okay, so if I'm not going to be able to do that today, what are the actions that I can take that can help get me to that place? What you start to realize is that the difference between you and somebody who is living in a dream is that there's a strong possibility that your actions for your plan can be the same, and you might have the advantage of less distractions. For example, let's say you want to be a massive podcaster. Okay, so you see, who is a massive podcaster right now? Well, the first person that comes to mind for me is Joe Rogan. And what does Joe Rogan do? Well, or what has he done? Well, he's recorded and published 3 episodes per week for a decade. Okay, so now you have the blueprint of what he did to get to his level. That is very helpful. And if you start acting on that blueprint, you will start to see results, and you probably won't see the level of results that the person who you look up to or admire has seen. But you might, after 10 years, if you follow the same exact script that he followed, or followed it in your own way with new technologies and new ways of communicating. So for me, it comes down to finding or figuring out somebody you admire and then reverse engineering their daily action steps. And so for me, it's like, all right, I want to be one of the best podcasters in the world. Who are the best podcasters in the world, and what have they done? Well, follow that blueprint and lean into it and do it day in and day out. And what's crazy is that you guys are doing the same action steps. I'm doing the same thing as Joe Rogan in the sense of I am putting out 3 episodes per week. And so for you, it could be, let's say you want to be a musician, right? Who's your favorite musician? Why did they become successful? What did they do? What were the actions they did? You're not going to be that person, but if you follow the blueprint that they gave, you could be your own version of you. So if I were to relate this to 75 Hard, it's like 75 Hard gave me the ability to be like, oh, here's a program that if I were to do these actions every day, I would probably feel better than I do now, because I would be the type of person who did what they said they were going to do even when they didn't feel like it. And it changed me. It fundamentally changed me, because then I can apply that to the podcast. Then I can apply that to working out. Then I can apply that to meditation, right? It's all connected. It's all the same thing. It's all about doing the thing you don't want to do, doing the thing that you want to do or say you want to do, but even when you don't feel like doing it. And that's going to be an important lesson for anyone to learn if they want to achieve greater feats than what they are living in this moment. So, got a few questions on Instagram. This is from Ben C, aka NB, neighbor Ben. How do you stay so positive all the time? Well, the thing is about staying positive is like, I'm just friends with the voice in my head. That is the truth of it. I was not always so positive before I learned about meditation and learned about sitting with silence and sitting with nothing. And I'm not trying to be positive per se. Like, of course, I want to look at the bright side of life and I want to like make the most out of every moment, but I'm not going out of my way to say, how can I be the most positive person that I can be? I'm going out of my way to say, how do I enjoy life the most? And so I guess becoming positive is really just a manifestation of becoming friends with the voice in my head and understanding that I want to have the best time on this floating rock in space. So Sky King asks, Jordan or LeBron? This is related to the question that Paul asked, which was about why are sports cool? I don't think I've ever seen Michael Jordan play live. And that probably would have impacted my answer on this. I think LeBron is the better player, but I think Jordan was more clutch. So that's my answer on Jordan or LeBron. It's hard. The mentality. So I'm going to revise my answer because here's the thing about Jordan. The thing I respect about Jordan was his mind and his ability to bend reality to his will. And I feel as if LeBron doesn't have that. LeBron has more natural gifts and is probably the better basketball player, but I appreciate Jordan's mind more than I appreciate LeBron's mind. And imagine Jordan's mind, but with LeBron's physical attributes. But LeBron's incredible too, right? It's like he's been in the spotlight for 20 years, never been in any scandal of any sort, been a consummate professional. So it's hard to give a good answer on that, but gun to my head, I think I would say Jordan. Nick asks, what would you differently if you had to restart? I assume Nick is talking about the podcast. I would probably, if my goal was to grow, I would probably focus more clearly on what I was talking about. But that's not my goal. But I assume that your goal might be to grow or to expand your show. Yusuf asks, how do you keep sight of the long game when nothing seems to work? I would say to ask yourself why it's not working. And if you were honest with yourself, what would it working look like? It's obviously easy to keep sight of the long game when everything is going exactly as you plan for it to go. But I think I would also recommend David Senra from the Founders Podcast, his episode 300 on James Dyson. And it's like what he was doing was not working for a long, long, long time. And he found a way, James Dyson did, to find a way to keep sight of the long game. So it's like when it's not working and you're keeping sight of the long game, it's almost like you're crazy, but the crazy ones are the ones who change the world. Or they're not, and they're just crazy. So you keep sight of the long game when nothing seems to be working by filling your mind with examples of people who have successfully done that. Jess asks, how have you been planning/coordinating with the people that you host on your podcast, i.e., like the process that you go about in order to meet up with those that you have spoken to? So for me, I don't really think about the process too much. I'm not really a big systems guy. I just go by feel, intuition, and I'm sure I've lost a lot of interviews because of that. But I go about recording it by reaching out to the person on Twitter or Instagram or email. And after that, then what's the next step? The next step is send them a Google Calendar invite with either the link to record it virtually or to do it in person. And then I'll email them or text them the day before the show to remind them, typically. And that's how I plan/coordinate it. It's pretty basic stuff, nothing revolutionary, but works for me. Jess also asks, what is the most valuable to you about what you do? For me, it's I'm getting better at communicating my thoughts from my head into the world. If you can get better at communicating your thoughts from your head into the world, you will become a human who's able to get more done. And for me, I find it's like therapeutic almost that I'm a better communicator today than I was a year ago. Like that to me is so exciting. And it's like, okay, what's next year going to look like? What's the following year? If you just look at how Joe Rogan speaks, for example, today versus how he spoke when he was 27, it's like night and day difference. And so I'm on a mission to get to know myself by speaking and listening. And that to me is the most valuable thing. The other thing is like, I get to learn from so many of the world's smartest, most interesting people and ask them questions like, and get to filter my experience and then show them how they've impacted my experience just based on my either research or literally just the ways in which they've changed my life. So that to me is very valuable. And that to me is like the greatest gift in the world. Feels like I'm living in a movie, truly. Like imagine that. You read a book and then the author comes on your show. Like, what is that? That's crazy. That person has spent years thinking about that book, thinking about that idea, thinking about those topics, and now you get to benefit from that knowledge. Yeah, I'm amazed by that. That is a thing that we can do and that I can do. So I feel very blessed for that possibility. And that to me is super valuable. Samantha asks, what's the most difficult part of the process / journey for you, and how are you actively overcoming it? So I assume you mean the podcast, the most difficult part of the process / journey for you. For me, it's the most difficult part of the podcast is, I would say, attracting more listeners at this point, attracting more people who resonate with the message. And I'm overcoming it by realizing that some part of it is in my control. I could tell you to share the podcast or listen to it, or I can be consistent on social media platforms to hopefully get you to share some clip or have some clip resonate with you, but also know that it's outside of my control. So the most difficult part is about growing the show, which is an incredibly difficult thing. And I'm so grateful for the amount of people that listen already. But it's also like, you can only control so much. So that's the current struggle. Arzy's Art asked a bunch of questions. I'm going to pick a couple that I think are interesting. What was the mindset / process of making meditation a habit? For me, it was looking at my friend, Tej Dosa, episode 1 of the podcast, and also one of, if not the most recurring guest on the show. I looked at him and I saw there's something different about this guy. And what I realized was he was acting with love. And why was he acting with love? I actually didn't realize he was acting with love at the time, but I knew that there was something different about him. And I knew that meditation played a critical role in his life. And so I just leaned into it and did it more. And it was just a process of looking at somebody that I admired and figuring out what attributes that they had and making it a part of my routine as well. Similar to Rogan, right? Mentioned before, he does 3 episodes a week. Okay, so I admire him and I'm going to try doing the same thing and see what happens. And the blueprints are out there, guys, for you to follow and for you to look at. And so my friend, I saw he had something to him that was different. It was meditation, and I tried doing it for 90 days and realized on the 90th day that, wow, I feel differently now because I'm stopping at a red light and I can see and feel my body in the red light and I feel myself get anxious. And oh my God, I've been getting anxious every time I checked out a red light before. So that to me was the process. The process was just looking at somebody who I respected and doing what they were doing. Arzy's also asked, what was the greatest day of your life? I mean, that Andy Frisella day was remarkable. It had so many things. It had meeting somebody who really deeply impacted me with 75 Hard. It was experiencing with a close friend, Hunter Weiss. It was seeing what excellence looks like in person. It was getting a great workout in. It was meditating that morning. It was a lot of caffeine, which is great too. And it was a remarkable day. So that to me was one of, if not the greatest day in my life. The greatest book you've ever read. Greatest book I've ever read. It's hard to pick one, and it's so dependent on where you are at what point in your life. I read Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant. At the time I read it, it was the greatest book of my life when I was in a really down, dark state. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. That was the greatest book of my life when I read that. So it really depends on where you're at in the journey of life. And it's like, it is so dependent on what you're bringing to that day is what you think is going to be the greatest. And our final question here today is, what or who are your dream guests? Whew. I need to create a list, and I have created a list in the past, and those include people like Mike Posner, Russ, Jocko Willink, David Goggins, Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Lex Friedman. I think I'm very attracted to people who have used their voice and minds to create massive change, at least in my own life. And I think because I deep down want to be one of those people. Want to be one of those people who's capable of creating change in others through my voice and or my actions. And so all of those people have done that for me. And also I got to add Michael Singer to the list, the writer of The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, 2 other books that changed my life and are up there for greatest books. He is a deep practitioner of spirituality and meditation, and I got to go and visit him one day in the not too distant future. So that would be a cool experience. But yeah, those are my list of dream guests. And if you know any of them or you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to introduce you to somebody who has impacted my life. That's how the Andy Frisella interview happened. It's like somebody who I'm friends with, they went out of their way to make an introduction for me. And I'm really grateful for that. And if you know one of those people, you're listening, let me know. And I would greatly appreciate that. So there are more people on that dream guest list. I need to sit down and write some out. But those are the few that come to mind. And Andy Frisella was one of those people. So cool to check off that from the list. Thank you for listening to this point in the episode. I am so grateful. I'm so honored. And I'm so thrilled that there are people who care, who ask these questions, great questions. And I'm going to be continuing to grow the show in 2023 and build it into hopefully one of the biggest shows in the world. And I'm incredibly honored that I've been able to talk to some of my heroes and that some people have resonated with those messages, words, questions. So thank you for being you. Thank you for spending your time on this podcast, because it's a podcast that is helping you, I believe, at a deep level, try to make sense of what we're doing in the world and try to get a little bit better. So the fact that you're doing that for yourself, pat yourself on the back. And I have a deep appreciation for people who are doing that. So thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody you think will enjoy it as well, whether that's through Twitter, Instagram, text message, group chat, LinkedIn. Been seeing LinkedIn pop off recently for a few messages or a few quotes. So wherever you share the show, if you enjoyed it and you got value from something in it, share it. And thank you so much. Until I see you again on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. Be well. Thank you. Peace.